Among the most brutal criminals, there are always those whose cruelty and sophistication in committing atrocities shock even the experienced. Today's story is about such inhumane individuals who hide behind the mask of ordinary people. To break through in a highly competitive field, you need remarkable talent and a bit of luck. Even the most gifted young talents can be thwarted by a fatal coincidence. And if you encounter those who don't hesitate to kill for a few bills, the chances of success become illusory. The childhood of Heather Stigliano, who was born in 1972 in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, is shrouded in mystery. Growing up in a close-knit community of a small town, the girl got used to intimate relationships between people. Perhaps it was this that instilled in her an excessive trusting nature. From her school years, she was drawn to the stage. Heather was distinguished by her artistry and inexhaustible energy. With a wide circle of friends, she easily found common ground with people. But in her personal life, not everything was cloudless. The year 1990 brought the breakup of the family. The divorce of her parents was a heavy blow to Heather's mother, Susan. After graduating from school, the girl aspired to fulfill her dream and conquer the stage. But her mother, who was going through hard times, begged her daughter to stay, as she had no other support. Heather did not plan to get stuck in the province forever, but she promised to be there until Susan recovered. For a whole year, the girl worked as a waitress to support herself and her mother, including emotionally. The recovery after the divorce took about a year. Finally, Susan acknowledged that she could no longer hold back her daughter, who was yearning for her dream future. Heather, fully prepared for adult life and determined to fulfill her long-cherished dream, set off for Myrtle Beach, a city in South Carolina, in September 1991. There she hoped to become a singer. Although Myrtle Beach may not seem like the best place to launch a career, there were relatively more opportunities there than in Heather's hometown. Moreover, her friends lived in Myrtle Beach, which determined her choice. Despite the expected difficulties, the 19-year-old girl believed that South Carolina would be a fateful direction for her, an ideal starting point for a brilliant career. Having rented a small apartment near the beach, Heather got a job as a waitress in a cafe to support herself in the early stages. She spent all her free time looking for opportunities to perform. First of all, she tried to find auditions and shows, but the entertainment industry was oversaturated everywhere. Having failed to conquer the stage on the first try, Heather experienced bitter disappointment. Months passed, she did not abandon her determination to achieve her goal, but faced a harsh reality. It became evident that it would take much more time to settle in a new place, so the ambitious girl was forced to work hard. During another phone conversation with her mother, Heather admitted that now she herself needed support. Susan gladly did everything possible for her daughter, supporting her during conversations, although she could not move to be with her. The mother and daughter, who had already communicated closely, now became even closer. But after the call on November 4, 1991, Heather disappeared from the radar. Susan desperately tried to reach her, but to no avail. The woman assumed that her daughter might have fallen into depression and stopped communicating, although it was not in her nature. Susan knew that Heather was not alone there, that she had close friends who would not leave the girl in trouble. In any case, she planned to visit her daughter in the near future. Susan did not suspect that Heather's acquaintances were also sounding the alarm. The very communicative and active girl had not been in touch for several days, which was strange. But neither friends nor girlfriends could reach her. When the silence dragged on for a week, two worried companions decided to make sure that Heather was okay. Passing by her rented apartment on November 11, 1991, they stopped by to see their friend. For almost a week, she had not been answering calls and not responding to knocks on the door. The absence of her car in the driveway did not raise particular suspicions. The young men knew that Heather was not supposed to work that day. At the same time, they were aware of her difficulties, especially financial ones. So they assumed that she could have sold the car or gone on business. The apartment was locked, but one of the friends owned the building and had a key. As soon as they went inside, it became clear, something eerie had happened here. Scattered things, furniture, and signs of a struggle were everywhere. And in the room, a terrifying sight awaited them. Heather was lying lifeless on the floor. Shocked by what they saw, the guys immediately called the police. The police officers who arrived at the small apartment on the coast of Myrtle Beach were struck by the brutality of the criminal. In the center of the chaotic mess of scattered items, broken furniture, and pools of blood lay the mutilated body of the girl. Judging by the nature of the injuries, she was brutally beaten and probably raped. The number of injuries was so large that law enforcement officers initially could not determine what exactly she had been tortured with. Only the forensic expert established that Heather was killed in 3 ways: beaten, cut, and strangled. In total, more than 40 separate injuries were documented, several of which could have been fatal. Some of the injuries appear to have been inflicted after the girl's death. The killer clearly did not intend to give her a chance of salvation and probably enjoyed her suffering. A kitchen lamp and a towel were used as weapons. According to close friends, some of Heather's belongings had disappeared from the apartment. First of all, the wallet that she always carried with her. The handbag from which it should have fallen out was lying on the floor. The camera, which the girl also often took with her, was also missing. The TV that hung on the wall was gone, as well as the car that was usually parked near the house. Based on these facts, the detectives assumed that the motive for the crime was robbery. But was this really the robber's main goal? Given the particular brutality of the violence against the victim, the probable rape, it seemed that the criminals wanted something more than just profit. Usually, robbers simply shoot a witness who accidentally caught them, not wasting time on torture. This picture did not add up to a single whole. There were several signs that Heather might have known her killer. Firstly, a pillow was carefully placed under her head, surprisingly clean, without a single bloodstain. As if the killer did it out of guilt or regret for what he had done. Secondly, the position of the body indicated a probable rape or consensual intimate relationship. At some point, this escalated into a brutal attack, the reasons for which remained a mystery. The absence of signs of a break-in indicated that Heather herself let the killer into the apartment. It seemed that she was familiar with this person and trusted him. Numerous friends and acquaintances of the girl, whom she had acquired quite a few in the few months of living in this city, immediately fell under suspicion. Thanks to her sociable nature, Heather had managed to make new acquaintances. Her entire circle had to be checked. 2 witnesses who called the police confirmed that the girl's social circle had expanded significantly in recent months. The task of working through all the persons of interest seemed extensive. While the forensic expert performed the autopsy and recorded the victim's injuries, forensic specialists thoroughly examined the crime scene. The apartment was heavily splattered with blood, especially the room where the beating took place. Traces left exclusively by the criminal were also found in other rooms. Obviously, after the murder, he carefully searched them for valuables, as evidenced by signs of attempts to tidy up. The unknown person tried to get rid of the most obvious traces of his presence. Despite this, many of them were found and documented. He acted chaotically, carelessly. It seemed that a dependent person under the influence of prohibited substances was operating there. First of all, the forensic experts were interested in the traces of the killer's blood, because he could have been injured while stabbing. Unfortunately, at that time, the capabilities of DNA expertise were limited, so it was not possible to collect blood samples. Instead, numerous fingerprints and footprints of the criminal were found. The most gruesome footprint was found on the victim's clothing, a bloody size 43 print. The detective suggested that it was left when the attacker was pressing the girl to the floor with his foot while delivering the blows. Not all the items used to inflict the wounds were found. In the apartment, only a bloody metal lamp was found, with which Heather received several blows before it fell apart. There were numerous stab wounds on the body, although the girl's kitchen knives remained in place. Fragments of white plastic were found near the corpse. It was assumed that they were the remains of another shattered household appliance, but which one exactly still remained a mystery. It was also missing from the crime scene. The forensic expert concluded that the third murder weapon was an iron or a similar object, heavy, with a flat metal surface. In addition, Heather had characteristic strangulation marks on her neck from an electrical cord. The analysis of the swabs showed no signs of rape. No biological fluids were found either. This reinforced the version that the killer had mental problems or was in an inadequate state, as he displayed excessive cruelty. For most of the detectives involved in the investigation, this case became the most horrific in their entire career. The police looked at the photographs that the girl had taken with the stolen camera and managed to print. One might think that she was working as a model. Undoubtedly, Heather was constantly surrounded by many admirers. So it was worth paying attention to the guys she was dating after moving. Jealousy or a bitter breakup could well be a motive for such a brutal crime. The detectives were surprised why Heather chose Myrtle Beach as the launching pad for her career. After all, the music and modeling spheres here did not have the same popularity as in Los Angeles or New York. There were fewer opportunities for realization. It was assumed that someone could have lured her to this city, convincing her to help with promotion. However, the girl's own motivation contradicted such assumptions. First of all, Heather's choice was due to the fact that it seemed easier to settle in Myrtle Beach. Even before moving, she had acquaintances here, whose support she counted on, unlike other hyped places where she would have been completely alone. In this industry, of course, it is much easier to take the first steps when you have someone to rely on. Plus, South Carolina was much closer and safer than California. And for Heather, this was essential, because she definitely did not plan to end her life so tragically. The mother often discussed future plans with her daughter. Heather always dreamed of moving forward, but it was Myrtle Beach that was supposed to be her first step to success. As law enforcement officials suspected, a couple of months after moving to South Carolina, the girl had acquired many new male acquaintances. Now she communicated with the friends of all those girlfriends and buddies because of whom she chose this city. There were many new young people of both sexes with whom Heather met and made friends. There was a military base nearby, so she had managed to make acquaintances among the officers as well. Suspecting personal motives and hatred, Heather's ex-boyfriend named Jack Norton was considered the most obvious option. The victim's mother told about him, so he had to be checked first of all. The young man served at a nearby armed forces base. He had no previous problems with the law. Everyone characterized Jack as a very positive, decent person, incapable of such cruelty. In a conversation with the police, he confirmed that the relationship with Heather was quite turbulent, but they parted peacefully, without mutual claims. This was confirmed by everyone who knew the couple well. Jack provided a reliable alibi. At the time of the attack, he was on duty in another country. This fact was easily confirmed by several authoritative sources at once, so the guy was excluded from the circle of suspects. The second potential criminal turned out to be Heather's friend, Chris Harkins. Several friends from the victim's inner circle reported their regular communication at once. As far as it was known, there was no romantic relationship between them. But the young man often visited the city on business. During such periods, Chris always stayed at his friend's place. They had met long before her move to South Carolina. The detectives found out that Chris and Heather had a completely friendly relationship without conflicts. Moreover, such cooperation was beneficial for both of them. In exchange for accommodation, the guy took over part of the apartment payment. For Heather, this was a tangible financial help, and Chris saved money compared to hotels. So he had no motive for the crime. In addition, Harkins also had a reliable alibi, which allowed him to be crossed off the list of suspects. From the mother of the deceased, the police learned about Robert Landau, a man much older than Heather, who behaved inappropriately with her. At the time of the investigation, he was a married captain in the armed forces. Approximately a week before the last conversation with her mother, Heather complained to her that she had been to a party where Robert was present. According to her, the girl got very drunk and suspected that Landau could have raped her while she was unconscious. This seemed like a strong motive. Heather was going to file a police report against him, which could have turned into serious problems for Robert. To protect his military career and prevent disclosure to his wife, he could have gone to extreme measures and killed Heather. The police immediately had many questions. How could a 19-year-old girl end up at a party in the company of such adult people, among whom there were even officers with the rank of captain? It looked extremely strange because not only the military but also their wives were present there. How could they allow something similar to what Heather described? It remained a secret. It was not possible to confirm all these assumptions. After that party, no one filed a police report. When the detectives raised the topic of the murder in a conversation with Robert Landau, he denied any involvement, as well as the fact of harassment of Heather at the party. He attributed everything to a misunderstanding, and his wife, who accompanied her husband that evening, confirmed his words. Landau was finally excluded from the list of suspects after checking his fingerprints and alibi. During the violence against the girl, he was on duty. Soon, a statement from the owner of a nearby antique store came in, which had to be checked. According to the witness, an inadequate client visited his store. The man behaved extremely suspiciously and tried to sell a camera, but the antique dealer refused to buy it, suspecting that the item was stolen and the seller was under the influence of. He did not take the camera and narrowly avoided being deceived. This case became the first step in the criminal's apprehension. After being refused the deal, the man became even more furious, but the mention of the police tamed the inadequate visitor. He decided to try his luck elsewhere. The suspicious person left the store, but the seller managed to go outside and write down the license plate number of his car. After contacting the police, the witness helped to compile a photo composite of the suspect, a white man with dark hair, approximately 35 to 40 years old. But the investigators placed their greatest hopes on Heather's missing car, a 1980 Chevrolet Monza. At the time of the theft, the car was 11 years old. Road services received an orientation on this vehicle. It was believed that it would lead the police to the trail of the bloody killer the fastest. And these assumptions turned out to be correct. Just a couple of days later, a similar car was spotted in Florida, a state away from the crime scene, Myrtle Beach. Initially, attention was drawn to the car due to traffic violations by the driver. He was stopped. When the license plates were run through the database, it turned out that the Chevrolet belonged to the murdered Heather Stigliano. The driver was 38-year-old James Whipple, who matched the description provided by the antique dealer. The suspect was detained. Heather's car was thoroughly searched. Several pieces of evidence were found on board at once. In particular, fragments of a plastic body, the beaten sole of an iron, which was used to beat the victim. It had blood on it. Exactly the same plastic fragments were found near the body in the apartment. In addition, a wooden stand was found in the trunk of the car. Comparing it with the lamp that Heather was hit with, the detectives concluded that this interior item was also stolen from the crime scene. A bent serrated knife was lying in the glove compartment. It was compared with the traces of the cold weapon on the neck of the deceased. Heather had absolutely identical marks that exactly matched the distance between the serrations on the back of the knife. Size 43 shoe prints on the victim's body matched the bloody clothes and shoes that the killer was transporting in the trunk. Experts compared the tread patterns. The prints on the body of the deceased clearly matched the soles. Why did James carry with him all this incriminating evidence? The answer to this question became obvious later, after a conversation with the detainee. Despite the numerous pieces of evidence, it was decided to put together the fragments of the shattered iron. From the white fragments, as if from puzzle pieces, the original shape of the body was restored. It perfectly matched the rest of the parts of the household appliance. James did not even try to deny his guilt. The man immediately confessed to committing the murder. He was extradited to Myrtle Beach. From the very beginning, the suspect cooperated with law enforcement and did not renounce his words. He claimed that he deeply regretted what he had done. James repeatedly confessed to killing Heather, mentioning his addiction to hard. His statements resembled warnings. To everyone he spoke with, Whipple said similar things. Some phrases became catchphrases, such as, "Drugs will do this to you, drive you crazy. You'll be ready to get money by any means. Even from behind bars, he sent letters to his acquaintances with similar revelations. According to James, he only met Heather once. Through a mutual friend, he found out where the girl lived. Whipple assumed that she might have cash savings, as she worked and saved money for her dream. He learned about the girl's desire to become a singer. James hoped to find something to profit from in her apartment. The man decided to attack in order to buy another dose of drugs on the street. When he ran out of money once again, unfortunately for Heather, her name was the first that came to his mind at that moment. The girl was doomed. The brute simply came to her uninvited, under the pretext of looking for their mutual acquaintance and needing help. Heather let him in out of the kindness of her heart. She was not afraid and paid with her life for her naivety. For some time, they talked about the friend who had introduced them. The uninvited guest allegedly was looking for him, but in fact, it was only a distracting maneuver to lull the victim's vigilance. As soon as a convenient opportunity presented itself, James grabbed the iron and hit Heather on the head several times. The girl fell, and he took a knife. He wielded it so furiously that he even bent the blade. Then the lamp came into play. After that, the killer strangled the victim with a cord to make sure she was dead. The outburst of ultraviolence was a consequence of Whipple's inadequate state. Before visiting Heather, he had taken drugs, which made him lose the ability to control himself. After the massacre, James took all the valuables he found in the dwelling, put them in the car, and drove away. But the next day, the murderer returned to the crime scene. Using the stolen key, he broke in and tried to destroy his traces. However, he was again under the influence of drugs, so he acted chaotically, leaving only more evidence. When the killer finished, he felt sorry for the girl. Then he carefully put a pillow under her head. After a full confession, James Whipple demanded the prosecutors seek the death penalty for him. The man insisted that he deeply regretted what he had done, but it would not bring Heather back to life. Therefore, the only thing he deserved was the death penalty. However, not all of James' close acquaintances were surprised by his actions. Relatives claimed that he had long suffered from drug addiction and had problems with anger management. All this caused a lot of troubles in his life. The list included 6 marriages and divorces, lack of communication with children, and the loss of all property. Most of the things stolen from the victim's house were found in the criminal's car, as well as in the hotel room where he periodically stayed. Whipple had already tried to sell some of the loot. Immediately after the murder, James drove 40 kilometers away from the city and visited a nearby antique dealer. He wanted to sell the girl's camera for more than he would get at a pawn shop. Later, the antique dealer heard about the incident on the news and contacted the police. This information was only needed later, as no one knew about Heather's death at that time. Subsequently, this allowed the identification of James Whipple. The antique dealer's testimony and the compiled photo composite were among the most important evidence against the killer. During the week that passed from the moment of the crime to the arrest, the suspect managed to drive through the state. But he never got rid of the physical evidence that he kept in the car. This was also attributed to his constant state under the influence of drugs. James was arrested on November 14, 1991. At the time of his arrest, 38-year-old Whipple had criminal records in 4 states for a whole range of offenses. They were mainly burglaries, drunk driving, and petty hooliganism. The violence against Heather became the most serious crime on his record. Now James looked like a broken man, unable to fight his destructive addiction. According to his own words, supported by the testimony of acquaintances, Whipple got involved with hard drugs after their rapid spread in the 80s. The trial of James Whipple began in 1994. He was charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery, vehicle theft, and a whole list of minor offenses. Against the backdrop of his confession, it made no sense to deny guilt. And Whipple did not dare to do so. During the hearings, the lawyer persistently fought for the life of his client. In particular, on August 25, 1993, the defense provided mitigating circumstances that indicated that James had experienced physical and sexual abuse in the past. However, this did not help. The jury found him guilty and recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed with this decision, but the case did not end there. In the following years, which James spent on death row, his defender regularly filed appeals in an attempt to challenge the verdict. The lawyer managed to secure a retrial. At this trial, the judge overturned the death penalty. The reason was that James had not the victim. And at the initial hearings, the jurors were not given proper explanations about this. So some of them could have perceived it as aggravating circumstances. Such cases usually move through the courts very slowly. The same thing happened in the case of James Whipple. This allowed for an agreement to be reached between the lawyers and the prosecution in July 2003. James renounced any rights to parole, and the prosecution, in turn, no longer demanded the death penalty for him. From then on, the criminal was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to early release. At that time, he turned 50 years old. In his final statement, James expressed that he felt terrible about the assault and murder he had committed. He agreed that he fully deserved the assigned punishment. Whipple stated that he regretted the pain he had caused Heather's family. The girl's mother listened to it all through tears. All these years, she had been present at every stage of the court hearings, as had the victim's father. However, the man could not attend the final hearing. Later, Heather's father told reporters that every moment of this process had been a real hell for him. Now he was glad that his daughter's death had not gone unpunished and that the family could finally find peace. The murdered girl's mother and father emphasized that they would never be able to forgive James. But they no longer hold a grudge against him, as it takes too much energy and prevents them from moving on with their lives. It is known that until his last breath, James insisted that he deserved to be executed. But his lawyer considered it necessary to avoid such a sentence. Probably, it was this persistence that saved Whipple's life. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.